So first, I want to ask you, Wednesday's ballots, do you think that these are really showing what the mood is going to be like in the Netherlands, especially are they a good preview for the elections that are coming up in June? Or could this just be a lot of emotion that's running wild and is just a fleeting moment that might soon pass?
Well, I think these elections, these local elections that we saw this week are actually quite significant. This was the first time that the Freedom Party stood in local elections. And going from literally a party of one a couple of years ago, that party has now swept the elections in one town, large town in Netherlands, Almere, and come in second in The Hague. So this is actually quite significant and definitely is a harbinger, I believe, of things to come in June. It certainly makes Geert Wilders the dominant political figure in the Netherlands at this time.
Now, to me, that's a little shocking to hear that somebody like Geert Wilders would be the dominant political figure there, because I find a lot of contradictions even in his arguments, especially he claims to be somebody that is a supporter of freedom, a supporter of free speech, and yet his policies, his beliefs are very anti-immigration, anti-Muslim or Islam. He claims that to differentiate between the religion and the people that follow the faith. I don't see, first of all, how you could differentiate between the two, but also how you could claim to be so supporter of free speech and freedom for all, and yet so support these types of xenophobic policies.
Well, I think what you have to do is examine the policies that are promulgated by the religion of Islam according to its law, the Sharia, which are extremely restrictive on speech. They are extremely restrictive on human behavior, on female equality, on the standing of non-Muslims before the law. They are inferior to Muslims, excuse me, under the Sharia. So you have to put this into perspective of the clash between a very open society that does believe in free speech for all, trying to contend with the new laws coming in with these large demographics of people who believe in no freedom of speech. So you really have to get into the actual study of the different systems to understand how one could be for freedom and yet for barring more Islamic immigration.
But it sounds a little nitpicky to me. I mean, if Western civilizations are supposed to be so open, so free, and so accepting, then why are they not accepting of other religions, despite what their laws and what their beliefs might be?
Well, I think that, we associate the Netherlands with tolerance. And I think what the Netherlands has come up again, and I've been watching the Netherlands for some years now, the Netherlands is coming up against a situation where they are questioning, can we be tolerant of the intolerant? And I think that we have to take a hard-eyed look at Islam and understand that under Islamic law, which does spread according to the demographic, you have intense intolerance of debate, of disagreement, of sexual equality, of religious freedom, of freedom of conscience. So in order to stand for these ideals that have made the Western world what it is, one has to not tolerate their extinguishment, which is what you see under Sharia law. So that is kind of the basis of this platform.
But do you think, is it about tolerance, or is it about hate, a sort of dislike for the Muslim population? Because as we said, there are huge demographic shifts now in many countries all over Europe, and it seems like this is not the first place. France also, they're well known for being outspoken about how they feel about these immigrant populations there. And so I feel like it's not only associated with Islam as a religion, but it's just a general attitude towards immigrants, which you could even perhaps draw parallels with here in the U.S. and how people treat the Latino population.
Well, I think one has to differentiate among different immigrant groups and understand what they bring to a new host country. If a large demographic is bringing the Sharia and bringing the kinds of repressions and lack of freedom that I'm talking about, then the host culture, which does stand for tolerance and openness, is going to have a culture clash, and that is what has been developing in the Netherlands and other European countries. So it's not so easy to tar everything with just a broad brush. I think we have to be very careful in how we examine these different belief systems and understand how the frustration and despair of people living in cities watching them become Islamized finds expression in the political system under a free system.
But do you think that this is something that the Netherlands right now is also just being a preview of a general attitude in Europe? Perhaps the more European countries are going to become more isolationist, not only in the sense that they don't want to engage perhaps in some of the conflicts and these large-scale conflicts like the U.S. has going on, but also that they want to just start turning more into themselves and going back to, I guess, their roots, is what you would say?
Their roots? Well, I think that we have to understand that Geert Wilders is not really a preview or a beginning. In some ways, he is a step along the way of a process that's been going on for some time. Islamization is not new to Europe, and we've seen, certainly in Netherlands, we've seen
But his popularity right now.
Yes, but I think it's almost a culmination of many years. We've seen political assassinations of figures who stood for things similar to his in terms of freedom of speech and openness. Pim Fortuyn, the famous politician who was killed a few years ago, Theo van Gogh, who was assassinated on an Amsterdam street, also by a jihadist. So you have to understand this as an expression of finding a leader who is brave enough, because it takes great bravery to make these statements in a multicultural, cultural relativist system, to make these statements differentiating between Western liberty and Islamic repression. And I think that that is the way that Americans and others should try to figure their way into this very interesting and important debate.
Well, I think one of the things that I tend to notice is that the notion of Western liberty, Wilders here, he also claims that Islam is very imperialistic. We can say the exact same thing about the Western Empire, about Western countries, and about our ideologies and the way that we think. And it's just interesting to see, really, to me, how far something like this might go. Thank you.